Okay, so for once, I'm gonna have a script right here on my iPad because I am tired of just fumbling and forgetting what I'm trying to say. With that being said, I'm probably not even gonna be looking at my script anyways. And I'm just reading off my letterbox anyways, so like it's not really, the real true script, but whatever works, I guess. Before we get started though, I'm gonna need to take an ibuprofen because what I just witnessed was painful. Alright, so let's cue the color grade. And we're gonna talk about Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning. Before we talk about this movie though, I do need to make it known that I'm not exactly the biggest Mission Impossible fan. However, I do find enjoyment out of these movies, right? And I might not be the biggest Tom Cruise fan either. I really wouldn't say he's like the only modern day action hero left, but I definitely respect the work ethic at the very least, right? And there's definitely enjoyment to be had when I'm watching most of his movies. When I say most of his movies, I just mean Mission Impossible. And before I continue talking about Mission Impossible, I need to talk about Shazam! Fury of the Gods. So, Shazam! Fury of the Gods was arguably one of the worst movies I've ever seen in my entire life. I'm not even exaggerating when I say that. Like, it's very, if anything, I'm underselling it. It's so bad that I no longer like comic books that much anymore. Comic books used to be something I really enjoy, really love, right? Especially the DC landscape. Marvel, not so much, but I do appreciate them to a certain capacity at the very least. But DC, I freaking loved. And somehow, because of Shazam! Fury of the Gods, I no longer really care about comic books. The pantheon of superheroes I really enjoyed dramatically shrank after the Shazam 2 Fury of the Gods. Anytime I go into a comic book adaptation or approach anything comic book related, sorry about the burp, I go in very nonchalant. I just don't care anymore. And it came to the point where, and because of Shazam! Fury of the Gods, I started seeing movies very differently after that, right? Like, I used to be the type of person that, isn't very impressed by, like, a lot of things. Maybe part of it just because I'm just naturally apathetic, and that's, something I had to work on my own. But after seeing Shazam 2 Fury of the Gods, a lot of bad movies I saw after that, I was giving it so much leeway. A lot of movies I would watch where people say, oh, this is like the worst movie of the year, blah, 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 or worst movie ever made. I would see it myself and then go, you know what? Still not as bad as Shazam 2 because Shazam! Fury of the Gods was that bad. I hated that film that much. And it doesn't help the fact that I saw Ant-Man Quantumania not too long ago. I saw that movie and I was like, wow, that was pretty bad. And somehow Shazam 2 topped that. I even had a friend that told me once, right? Hey dude, like ever since we saw Shazam, any movie you see after that, the way you talk about them, there's a huge change in your tune. There's a huge change in tune in the way you talk about these movies. And that I am just so much more easygoing on almost anything I see nowadays. And a lot of the times I still point out, like it's major flaws and errors, but like those major flaws and errors doesn't, irritate me or bother me as much like Shazam 2 Fury of the Gods did. If anything, that's probably the last movie that has ever really irritated me to the point where I am just genuinely upset when I finish that movie. So why am I talking about Shazam 2 in a Mission Impossible movie? Because somehow Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning was on par with Shazam 2 of all movies, which is just absolutely insane to me. Because Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning, right? That movie built up a lot of momentum going into The Final Reckoning, right? Even if a lot of the stunts in that movie weren't original, like at least the set pieces and where it took place, or at least a lot of set pieces in that movie, still carried a lot of weight because of the context and the way that it was built up in that movie. Plus, it was actually just exciting to watch in general, even if it's things we've already seen before. None of that carries over, or none of that could be said in The Final Reckoning. So Dead Reckoning showed that the franchise still has a lot of life in it to finish off on a strong note. And it did a really good job at setting up, The Final Reckoning. But somehow The Final Reckoning just screams that this is just tired. It's done. It's drained. It just wants to finish. And it left me wondering, like, what happened to all that momentum from Dead Reckoning, Like, it came in swinging. It really wants to, end the franchise, but it wants to do it on a strong note. But Final Reckoning did not get the memo for some reason. And I think the best way for me to really discuss this movie is really talk about the spoilers or go into spoiler territory for a little bit. But for the most part, I have to say this movie is just simply lazy. Just super lazy, and it's just so absurd that I have to use that word in not just a Mission Impossible movie, but a Tom Cruise movie in general. Because I don't think lazy is ever the word I would ever describe Tom Cruise as, right? Because like the dude does his own stunts, and like what, he's in his 60s, 80s or something like that. I don't know. Dude's like 100 years old or something, whatever, right? And he's still doing stunts. So I'm just like, that's something to applaud, Like you don't gotta we might all disagree with Scientology, but still gotta respect the hustle on the man, right? But ultimately, if I can sum things up, right, the film has some of the dullest and most forgettable and most uninspired set pieces with ridiculous pacing and uninspiring shot compositions and certain scenes weren't shot at all, which leads to the next problem. The heavy emphasis on nostalgia bait with meaningless callbacks through flashbacks makes this movie seem even more lazy. This film offers little to no payoff to not just close out many of the character arcs, but also for a long-running franchise. This movie is a Shazam out of 10. And I think that's the real Mission Impossible right there. How are you as bad as Shazam Fury of the Gods? That's insane. So that's my general, I guess, spoiler-free rundown of the film. Like it's a lot of exposition that you don't really care about. And the few set pieces that we do get were just very dull, very uninspiring, right? There just wasn't much going on in the film at all. So I just binge watched Daredevil. Great show, love it. And then I binge watched Born Again right after that, right? A lot of episodes in season 1 of Born Again I would describe as nothing burgers. After walking out of this movie, like, this is an even bigger nothing burger. It's the nothing burger without the burger and the nothing. So yeah, that's the real Mission Impossible right there. That's insane, and it's just absurd to, the fact that I even have to say that about this movie. So here, this is kind of where I step into spoiler territory a little bit, and really talk about, I'm probably going through act by act, because each act kind of have like its own major problem that it was plagued with, and when you put it all together, like, it just makes a really crappy product at the very end of the day. So Act 1, for the most part, was just recapping through exposition on what happened in the movie before it, right? Like, yeah, I know it's been 2 years since the last movie happened, right? And some people could forget certain plot points pretty quickly, or who was who, or what did what, etc., etc. Like, especially the Entity, for example, right? I didn't even remember it was called the Entity until, well, it announces itself again in this movie. And then what they did from there was explain again what the Entity was and why it's a threat. And recapping a movie isn't the worst thing in the world, but the problem is it spent so much time, almost the entire first act, recapping the first movie. And throughout the first act, they're also littered in like a lot of, flashbacks from previous entries as well. Usually flashbacks are fine when, it's really quick, it's simple, and it naturally blends in, right? It's brought up organically. However, and usually it's done really quickly as well. And usually you don't really need to, you don't need to go on this long to recap something unless it was something way, way earlier in the franchise. Now that's bringing back up again as the main plot thread. That's when you usually want to put more emphasis on recapping something from a previous entry, right? Sorry, I'm burping a lot. Usually you don't want to spend this much time recapping something when it's literally just one entry right before this, right? And if you do that, it's fine as long as you keep it short and bring it up organically, right? But however, in this movie, it spends like a good quarter to even a third just recapping what happened in the first movie. It re-explains to us what the Entity is and why it's a danger, even though we already know from just by watching the previous movie. And it's even worse that, they try to pad out screen time by putting in, flashbacks from previous movies, and they all just feel so out of place. Like, I know you're ending the franchise, so you want to use nostalgia bait, but like, it just felt super forced, and it doesn't add much to the story or narrative either. So like, once again, that's just really lazy. And there was even an action sequence that happened off screen. Literally, Tom Cruise was fighting a couple dudes, then all of a sudden the camera was just looking at Haley Atwell's face the entire time. And then by the time we looked at Tom Cruise again, the fight scene was over. Like, they tried to play it off as something really funny by having us look at how shocked Haley Atwell is. I understand what they're trying to do with their character, right? But she's way over in her head, like she's a fish out of water in this scenario or in these situations, right? But then, but ultimately, like, this is supposed to be a fun action sequence, but it all happened off screen. Like, that's just incredibly lazy. This shows that they didn't have a proper, well thought out choreography for this action sequence. So guess what? They just pan the camera over to Haley Atwell's face, play sound effects in the background, and then that's it. We saw nothing. In a movie that doesn't have a lot going on for it to begin with, this really hurts the movie even more. So that's kind of just sums up the first act, right? Just a lot of boring exposition. Not just boring exposition, but like a recap on things that we already know as well. And pointless callbacks to previous films. The second act was, if the first act wasn't putting you to sleep already, then the second act was kind of like the second dosage of melatonin, because oh my god, because the exposition just keeps on going from here on out. Here they start discussing, oh, this is the game plan on how we're gonna stop the Entity, blah 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 blah, but they just keep going on and on and on about it. Like, dude, we know already, dude, we know. And then we finally get our first, actual major set piece, and it was Tom Cruise diving into the shipwreck underwater, right? And I'm sorry, but this scene was just really boring. It was slow with nothing much really happening. Ideally, it's supposed to be building up tension, right? But like, I just wasn't feeling it, man. Like, I'm already bored from this non-stop exposition with nothing happening. So then now we go into the set piece all slow again. And now we go into this set piece really slowly on top of that. Like, no, dude. That's just ridiculous. Stop. Just get to the point already. And by the time things start happening, it's like, oh man, it's just too late already, man. Like, I'm already checked out. Like, even the tension towards the end of the set piece didn't feel that tense at all. Because, like, we still got, like, another third of the movie to go, so obviously he's not going to die out. If we're just now finally getting a major set piece 2/3 into the movie, that's either a telltale sign on how the movie's going to finish out, or it's going to treat us to something even bigger. Unfortunately, we got the former of the two options, because nothing really happens after that still. The final act was when Gabriel, you know, the franchise-long villain, comes back in, whatever, says some really cheesy, stupid things. I mean, I know they're trying to play into like this, they're trying to play into the cheesy spy trope, but like, dude, it's 2025. That's outdated at this point. Just stop. And especially the fact that, you know, from what I remember anyways, both Mission Impossible Fallout and Dead Reckoning mostly did away with all that too. They might have had some still maybe, but like for the most part, you know, it wasn't there anymore. This is what you get into the next really lame set piece. Not to mention some of the cheesy dialogue, you know. Freaking Gabriel's like, I have a plane ready for me to fly me to minimal safety distance, and I bought a spare. I'm like, oh my god, that's so cheesy for you to say. And not to mention, that was a huge foreshadow. I mean, granted, the trailer already gave it away if you saw the trailer, but like still, I'm like, oh my god, you're just forcefully setting up a set piece right now, and that's just not cool. And then once we actually get to the set piece, dude, nothing really happens. Nothing exciting. It was so freaking boring. And like, it's literally Top Gun at home. Like, nothing happens in this entire set piece, dude. Nothing. It's so boring. Like, the stunts were really lame. There weren't really that many stunts at all. It was just him trying to hang on to the airplane. That's really lame. And like, oh my god, it just felt so uninspired and so lazy. Let's see here. The final act was just the same thing for the most part, but absurdly uninspiring dialogue by our main villain to connect the two acts together, as well as more boring dialogue that don't really mean much. Blah 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 blah. Oh, there's also in the second act, there's a whole, you know, sequence with Russians and them finding, you know, the coordinates. They found the coordinates, and then the Russians just disappeared for the rest of the movie. Like, there's still potential plot threads for them to, you know, come back in again. That didn't happen. Like, what? Like, the movie literally just forgot about them, and it's just so bad. What? And then this movie has some insanely awful character payoffs at the very end, you know. Previously, right, in Dead Reckoning, I was very convinced that, you know, they're setting up Haley Atwell to take over the franchise. And, you know, I believe it. I can see it working, right? And then this movie, she had little to nothing to do, as well as anyone that wasn't Tom Cruise. Once the sequence in the Arctic with the Russians wrapped up, like, everybody else was just pointless. They just did minimal after that. So as I said about the final act, you tell me the villain conveniently brought a spare... Okay, whatever. Now, to talk about the most unsatisfying ending to any character arcs in the entire cast, it has to be the main villain. This is a franchise-long villain, by the way, and he goes out with a wet fart. Hold on. Let me correct that. He goes out with a whimpering fart out the dick hole. This is the guy that caused Ethan Hunt a lot of, you know, torment and suffering and just other, you know, trauma in general. So you imagine when he finally gets justice, it'll be like very dramatic and very satisfying. But they did it. They ended him off in the most anticlimactic way possible, and it was super unsatisfying. Like, literally just the entire sequence, it was a lot of smug shit talk, and then he just comedically dies at the end. Literally, he just hit his head, cracked his skull on one of the plane fins, and then just falls out in the sky. They were trying to play that off as a joke, but we're not laughing with the movie. We're laughing at the movie. We were laughing at the writers when they wrote that into the screenplay and said, yep, that's how we're gonna end this character's arc. There is no better way to end this character's arc. There's no fucking way, dude. Like, me and my friend, we were laughing so hard. But the thing is, I don't think it's meant to be funny either, even though it has like a comedic take on it. But so we were just holding it in, and it was not easy. Like, there is no way they really decided, yeah, that's how we're gonna kill off that character right there. So overall, I'm just like, why? What's the behind the scenes when making this film, right? Like, it just feels so lazy. There's like no tension whatsoever throughout the entire film, and everything just felt so inconsequential, and the dialogue just felt unnaturally forced, and just, oh my god, dude. I've never been much of a Mission Impossible fan, as I've stated already, but this laziness is just unacceptable. And it actually kind of pains me to say that, because that's not something I want to say about any of the Mission Impossible movies, or anything I almost said John Cruise, or anything Tom Cruise does in general. And this is how the franchise comes to an end. Not to mention, the main antagonist, the entity, took a huge backseat. And when it was being, you know, encapsulated into the, you know, that shiny, glowing hard drive or whatever. It also felt super anticlimactic, you know. But overall, man, like, this was not a good viewing experience. And this was almost 3 hours long, by the way. Just a non-stop nothing burger. For a franchise that has a lot to go out on, it doesn't do anything. It just ends. That's it. So now I'm just left, you know, flabbergasted, like, damn, what? That's it? Is that it? Is that how the franchise is gonna end? So, I mean, that's all I really gotta say, man. Like, this movie is just so absurdly lazy. It has nothing to give, and that makes me mad. So yeah, I don't know what to say, man. That's about it, really. There's a couple videos I have in the backlog right now that I've been working on. They're all already pre-recorded, right? The video's recorded, the audio's recorded. I'm just editing them right now. I got a video on Sinners coming out. I also got a video on Thunderbolts coming out. If anything, they're supposed to come out already. I've just been both really busy, and when I'm not busy, I've been really lazy. So with that being said, you know, I'm pushing this video forward because not only is, you know, this movie is more recent than all of them, but because, you know, I think this is the smoothest recording I've done because I just have so much to say about this movie, right? Or I'm just really on fire to talk about this movie because it made me so mad walking out the theater. And when I walked out, I saw, you know, this movie poster next to the Superman movie poster, and I'm just like, get this movie poster away from Superman, dude. Oh yeah, not to mention, speaking of superhero movies, Vanessa Kirby wasn't even in this movie either. And from Dead Reckoning, it looked like she was being set up. It looked like she was being set up to have a bigger role in this film as well, or at least some role in it. But she just straight up didn't have an appearance. Granted, you could probably say it's because she's busy with Fantastic Four, which is coming out this summer. Yeah, that's about it, really, man. Like, man. It's crazy that there's finally a movie, I think, offends me as much as Shazam Fear of the Gods has. So yeah, that's about it. I got another movie to catch tomorrow, and it's being Friendship this time. I hear it's pretty good. I might make a small video on that, we'll see, but that's about it, man. Peace out.